Ghana's funding options for 2024 down to 2026 are anticipated to be restricted to domestic treasury bills and multilateral, including bilateral partners, due to a lack of access to the global market. The World Bank projects that until 2027, Ghana's primary sources of funding will be T-bills, multilateral loans, and other bilateral lenders. From 2023 down to 2026, the World Bank is expected to disburse about $3 billion, including about $1.5 billion for project loans, $1.15 billion for budget support, and $400 million for other projects. Now, this morning from Accra, Ghana, I have Derick Emmanuel, who is the research and a policy analyst. And he will be talking to us on this particular topic. Of course, he's a research and policy analyst at the Institute for Energy Securities. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Now, how might the limited access to international markets affect Ghana's economic stability and the growth prospects over the next few years? Because we see that it's been limited to multilateral and bilateral partners.
All right, thanks for the opportunity once again. Basically, what it means that you have now a limited access to financing or funding. You do not have any alternative or any sort of other sort of finance or other sources of revenues to be able to finance anything that you want to do. So now you are limited to only one source, which is either to make use of the T-bills or to make use of the bilateral or the multinational loans or funds that we can get. For access to capital market, we would have gotten an alternative where we'll be able to procure our own loans at our own terms and conditions and probably use it for whatever thing that the country deems fit as a priority. But now, when it comes to multinational or maybe bilateral, sometimes there are certain conditions that you need to meet, and some of them you do not have that kind of leverage or your own flexibility to be able to use the funds for whatever thing that you want to use it for. They are backed by certain terms and conditions. When it comes to the treasury bills, basically you are just crowding out the private sector. And so the private sector will find the treasury bill market as more conducive, and then people will not be able to access it for private use, which can equally create employment and other things. And so definitely it's going to limit your access to finance, and then that can also hinder your economic growth to a larger extent.
But then when you look at the bilateral lenders, what are the criteria that you actually are referring to the other time? Probably could just help us understand a few of them.
So some of them is based on project specifics. And so if they are going to give us any funding, and let's take that funding is towards climate change, and that is what will give you funding for. And so if climate change or climate issues are not your priority, then definitely you cannot utilize that money for any other thing. If it's towards the energy sector or anything that will enhance electricity assets, then basically that is what you can use that money for. But if it's not got to do with that and you have something to use, or maybe you have a different need, which is towards agriculture or agribusiness or manufacturing, then definitely that money cannot be used for it. And so these are some of the conditions that you need to meet. And then it also gives you project specifics that those monies can be used for.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, can the $3 billion expected from the World Bank between 2023 and 2026 adequately support Ghana's budget and project needs?
Right. And so to a larger extent, that is an amount of money, but not quite significant enough to be able to solve Ghana's issues. Because what Ghana requires is more than that. The root cause accounting for all this was about our budget deficit, where we are not able to raise enough taxes, and then our expenditures continue to increase. Our expenditures more or less not towards the infrastructure or things that will be able to repay itself. It is more towards recurrent consumption or consumption expenditure without adding much to the national GDP. And so for IMF or World Bank's money of $3 billion, that is quite not enough. Even just one year down the line, we just spent almost 1 year. Started 2023, 2024, we are here. We've received close to 1.56 billion. That is more than half of it. And the thing is also expected to end by 2026. And so if you even received half of it yet and nothing much significant to be shown for, then definitely 3 billion will not adequately solve Ghana's issues.
Well, knowing fully well that this $3 billion is not actually free money, and don't you think it is within the ambit of what the Ghanaian government knows that it can't pay back, or probably are you looking towards the possibility of restructuring talks again if it hopes to access more funds?
Well, it hopes to access more funds. Basically, we don't have any choice than to repay. We had to resort to the IMF basically because we have to undergo the debt exchange program where domestic debts were affected, and then other institutional investors were equally affected. Even other foreign investors were equally affected. We have no other source of respite than to go to the IMF to buy back some credibility to be able to access the capital market. We were banned out of the capital market. We didn't have any other money. And so the only way we can resort to raising any sort of finance or funding is to go back to the IMF. And then as a lender of last resort, they also came to our aid to give us that 3 billion. We hope to manage it better, to be able to buy back the credibility, to ensure macroeconomic stability, and then its indicators to prove credit worthy to the international community so that going forward, we can have access to the capital market and then get more alternative sources of finance or funding.
Okay, so let's look at even the areas of funding or spending as it is. What are the specific projects or maybe sectors that will benefit from, let's talk about the $1.5 billion project loans expected from the World Bank?
And so for project specifics, definitely to be something that will go to job creation, entrepreneurship, agriculture, and agribusiness. These are things that will be able to repay back the loan or generate economic activity that will be able to give income to people and to be able to repay the loan. We also expect that it will also go into the energy sector because we also have issues with not much like other countries are experiencing. We have a higher access to electricity rate. What is our concern is how to continue powering the thermal plants to be able to generate constant power supply to businesses and then to households. And so we expect it to go into infrastructure, basically not recurrent consumption or any consumption of any kind.
So if we remove that and the fact that you said that even the $3 billion dollars is not even enough, and we know that there's a $1.15 billion being expended or that will be provided for in terms of budget support, what is actually that thing within the Ghanaian government's budget that seems to be gulping so much that this finance will not be able to cover?
So as I earlier stated, it's all about budget deficit. And so our expenditure continues to balloon. We have a huge size of government where the government machinery has about almost 120 ministers. That is a huge amount of money. Our wage bill is also quite high. And nothing much that can be done about it, but it's all got to do with the executive expenditure, which is quite high. When you talk about, we also have a lot of tax holidays that goes on to other multinational companies tax exemptions, and they do not pay for those taxes. And that is also another source of revenue that we could have also gotten from. We are now relying on our internal measure where we make use of the e-levy, which is the electronic levy, which also helps generate a huge amount of money for government. And so we hope to be able to increase our taxes so that our taxes, our revenue component will increase and match up with our expenditure. And then at one breath, hopes to reduce all our current expenditures or expenditures that's more or less got to do with consumption.
Okay, so to wrap up, Derick, there's also a securement of loan from the AFDB. How will that, most especially the fact that it's the African Development Bank's $338 million disbursement, particularly in the $200 million that would be made available for project loans. How do you think that would equally impact Ghana's infrastructure and development goals?
It will impact positively because anything that goes to do with infrastructure is something that can repay every loan. And so, suppose you are taking loans and you're not spending it on consumption and it's based on infrastructure, then it means that infrastructure will stand the test of time and then to be able to regenerate the income to be able to repay back the loan. And so far as it's towards project financing, which is infrastructure, then that is a very good thing to go by.
Okay, so we can only hope that when these funds eventually come in for the Ghanaian government, they will be expended for the intended purpose because that would actually bring about growth for the country and, of course, its economy. Thank you so much, Derick Emmanuel, Research and Policy Analyst at the Institute for Energy Security. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you as well.